Welcome everybody to the auditorium. This is our first in-person Grand Rounds in a while. We've put together a Grand Rounds program for this year that combines kind of science and kind of neuroscience, but also advocacy, and wanted to start with a program. This is Matthew Talija. Did I say it right, Matt?
Correct, yeah.
Who is a speaker who a couple of our residents had seen at this year's APA and felt was a really powerful speaker, and provide a perspective that would be really important for us to consider as physicians and as psychiatrists. I'm going to read an introduction, and then Dr. Butler will also have provide some context. So Matthew Talija is the founder and executive director of Matt's Mission Incorporated, a nonprofit patient advocacy organization incorporated to standardize and revolutionize the mental health care space. Matt's Mission is comprised of representatives from the NFL, medicine, psychiatry, law, academia, politics, and finance professionals. Matt shares his lived experience to advocate for transparency and standardization of trauma-informed care within the mental health care system. Matt has spoken publicly, including at the American Psychiatric Association meeting in May of 2024, discussing crisis intervention. He has partnered with the Sachs Institute for Mental Health Law, Policy, and Ethics at the University of Southern California School of Law. His story was featured in the New York Times Science section in May 2024. Covering its 2024 APA conference session, the article yielded over 400,000 subscriber views online and received over 1,100 response emails and letters from readers. Following this article, Matt was solicited for speaking engagements by top 10 medical schools, including Columbia Medical School, and by other governmental organizations and leading psychiatric educational organizations, and has been invited by the APA Scientific Committee Review Board to present at its 2025 conference in Los Angeles. Matt is preparing to attend law school, where he will continue his efforts toward improving care in the mental health care systems. More about Matt's mission, founding story, and four-pronged approach is available on its website at www.mattsmentalhealthmission.net.
Good, thank you. I'm just going to be really brief here and say how grateful I am to Matt for coming. This is a really important and troubling topic. We are really fortunate as psychiatrists, and I feel really fortunate to be working with you, this group of psychiatrists. We know our mission is really complex. We know that the things we do can be challenging at times, and we can face real moments of difficulties. And we can continue to think about how we can improve the care that we provide. So with that in mind, I really want to thank Matt and thank all of you. And here we go. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Dr. Butler and Dr. Donlin. There we go. As Dr. Butler was saying, the nature of what I'm talking to you about today is somewhat troubling, and I want to be clear about that. I'm going to be talking to you about the worst thing that ever happened to me in my life as a calculated sacrifice and effort to hopefully get it right for others. Matt's Mission Inc. was founded in wake of the story I'm telling you today in hopes of fostering a safer and more equitable mental health care ecosystem. Thank you to Dr. Donlin, Dr. Butler, Cynthia Blair, and Dr. Markovich, if I'm saying that correctly, for inviting me here, as well as Kaylee, who saw the APA talk and I felt compelled to help foster me coming here. I think, we need better leadership in psychiatry, and the fact that you guys received the presentation at the annual conference the way you did and invited me here says something. So with that, I'm here to tell my story of lived experience And the PowerPoint today is titled Turning a Patient's Trauma into a Power Source for Change. So my story, today we're here primarily to talk about crisis intervention, but I believe nuance and the complexities of the matter are critical to having the uncommon depth that can help you formulate your own paradigms and beliefs as it relates to getting it right for others. I have obsessive compulsive disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder. Always had OCD. It sort of was behind the radar and everything was going great till about age 15. I played 4 sports and got all A's and had a lot of privilege and really didn't face many hardships at all. And then at age 15, you can see me as a little kid during the golden days over on the left, but at age 15, I had sudden and severe onset symptoms of obsessive compulsive disorder. My first encounter with the mental health care system was jarring. I went to a place that's since been shut down for not keeping up with standards called Westwood Lodge. My parents were, reactive, didn't know much about mental health, just knew that their son was uncharacteristically angry and anxious and wanted to get me help. But when we went there, I went down to the bottom floor for the when they had me I don't know what the word would be, admitted, registered as a patient there. I went down to the bottom floor and right away there were some of the sort of degrading and somewhat sci-fi realities of being a consumer in the mental health care system. They had me wearing colored hospital garments and, asked me to take away my shoes and my shoelaces and, thinking, what the heck happened to my life? Last year I had got an academic scholarship to private school and was playing football and things were going well. And then, here I am in this sort of scary environment. And it wasn't long into that stay before I saw some things that would forecast some of the problems in mental health care systems that I'm here to help try to solve today. There was another patient, I don't know what his issues were or what he was dealing with, but I was sitting down at what was essentially a lunch table in the room, and he said, welcome the new guy, and took his clothes off and jumped on the table. And he was physically and chemically restrained right in front of me. And I didn't understand at that point in my life as a 15-year-old boy how that impacted me from an optics standpoint of what the mental health care system was really all about. I returned to school that as a sophomore that following year in 2007. They had just, without an accurate diagnosis of OCD, they had shoveled a lot of SSRIs in my direction. I put on a lot of weight. Football was a great outlet for me, and I had some really good mentors and leaders in the space that let me know I'm not crazy, and they support me. And I think that was a pivotal and can't be overstated element and ingredient in some of the treatment that went well. And my inclusion at Severian, which you can see there. I finally, after being misdiagnosed several times and getting some treatment that was really more deleterious than helpful, and witnessing multiple physical and chemical restraints, and again sort of fostering mistrust and really scaring the crap out of me as a teenager who was just trying to get help for an illness. I was accurately diagnosed a Canadian woman who was a psychiatrist at the same hospital that the crisis that I'm here to talk to you about today. After she left, before she left, I had a really good working relationship with her. She called my folks and said, looking over Matt's record, he's definitely got OCD, and we were skeptical. And didn't really know whether or not to trust or whether or not to give the mental health care system another shot. But one of the reasons I'm not anti-psychiatry and I'm very much a believer in how things can go is because she persisted to get through to my most visceral fears, wounds, and emotions. And to say we flipped the script was an understatement. I went from being psychiatrically hospitalized and misdiagnosed as a junior in high school to heading into my senior year. I was back on honor roll, back on high honor roll, and helped lead my high school football team to the state championship. And some of those guys that you see in that picture, became best friends, lifelong friends, really have provided their own testimony in terms of how being proximal to me through every stage of that process helped destigmatize and provide hope for them as they interact with other family members, loved ones, and friends who have experienced mental health challenges. The Canadian psychiatrist, Dr. Stewart, shortly after left for British Columbia and passed me off to another MGH psychiatrist who she really believed in, Dr. Tristan Garindo. He was from I think 2015 to I don't want to misquote, 2017 or 18, the teaching director at the APA. And I had a great working relationship with him. I was sort of living life and steady working despite the symptoms that had originally brought me to the mental health care arena. I worked back on a lot of the mental rituals and had got an opportunity as a Division I football player, and things seemed like a really promising trajectory heading into 2014. That's not to say I wasn't free of any of the burdens or obligations that come with the condition in the first place. I had worked really hard to minimize the role that OCD was playing in my life. And there was a new challenge when I was exposed to some of the realities of high level sports at the FBS level. Like, you're playing at Penn State, you're playing in front of 99,800 people. And a lot of guys, whether they, have an anxiety disorder or not, really crumble under that pressure and struggle with that. So for me, tolerating the bodily sensations of anxiousness in those arenas and not mentally ritualizing was a challenge. And as such, the summer of 2014, prior to my junior season, I enlisted at the OCD Institute at McLean's Hospital in Belmont. There was a young psychologist who, I've since forgiven in my own heart because he knew not what he was doing, that introduced me to a really rigorous form of exposure and ritual prevention, which in theory, and I'm sure you as the professionals understand, is evidence-based to have a great benefit for people who are dealing with OCD. However, the aggressiveness of the scripts was far too much. And, I was reading these scripts for a phobia of losing my identity. And so they were imaginal and in vivo surrounding phobia. And the exposure scripts were oftentimes reading for 4 hours a day these build scripts about the worst things I could think about myself. So, well, this may trigger some. There was some judgmental language. You're a loser, you're a piece of shit, you're a faggot. These scripts were saying these things, and I was debating in that exposure script and deal with the discomfort without assuring myself that I was not those things. What it ended up doing was making me really depressed because it, again, the practitioner who was young and was really pushing me, and I was a type A, came from a football background. I was going to work really hard to solve this illness like I would anything else. And it got to the point where, I was vomiting in buckets in the running backs room prior to practice when reading these scripts, and, really unwell. Despite that process going on, it was performing great. That season I got accolades. I got the starting job, a full scholarship, academic all conference, and some people started coming to me about having a healthy and long career in the NFL. I left for winter break that year, and I was super depressed, and we were going back to the hospital and trying to get us back, get me back in and get me the appropriate help, because the super aggressive OCD didn't really account for the emotional OCD treatment didn't account for the emotional toll or the accumulated trauma that I'd had since 15 in navigating the mental health care system, iatrogenic trauma, if you will. This picture here is from that 2014 season. You know, I had a good relationship with my teammates. The coaching staff went above and beyond to accommodate if I needed to leave for therapy appointments, and we're really in a pre-pandemic world, trailblazers at the intersection of sports and mental health. So I come back in the spring of 2015, and UMass had already scheduled, knowing my need, online classes that semester so that I could hopefully leave for the appropriate treatment that I needed, deal with the OCD, the depression, the trauma, and realize my trajectory in March or April of 2015. I stepped in front of my teammates with the advice of Dr. Grindo, and kept it transparent and accountable, which I believe is the best method for team sports and dealing with serious mental illness, and said, like, hey boys, guys know I got OCD. I work really hard to minimize the role it plays in my life. I'm going to be stepping away for the rest of the spring and summer to get some help for that, but I'll see you week 1 versus Colorado, week 2 versus Notre Dame. And, you know, I was really proud to have earned their respect and have left on a standing ovation. But when we parted ways with the team and I went back to the OCD Institute, my family and I began to realize just how broken the mental health care system can be. And, you know, it eventually led to the forming of Matt's mission. They doubled down on the overaggressive ERP when I became very depressed. As a large football player, I was labeled by the program director, who we'll just call Nurse Ratchet, as intimidating. My family had a meeting on a Friday. They called us in and kicked me out after getting me all rubbed up with these exposures. And, you know, in that meeting, me, the young psychologist, the program director, and my family, I had said to the program director that, hey, listen, you know, this is the same hospital who, when you tragically lost an adolescent psychiatrist in 2009, you asked me to provide testimony at their memorial service. This is the same hospital that the Canadian psychiatrist would have me mentor male adolescent athletes with OCD. As a favor to her, when you've needed me, I've been there for you. And now I'm at a very vulnerable and fragile time in trying to start a pretty elite career. And I've gone all the way, you know, put my neck out. I've stepped in front of the team. There was an article in the Amherst Gazette about Talia stepping away with personal issues. The girl that I'm dating is like, what's so personal you can't talk to me about? And I was in a very vulnerable space. And I said, for me to go all in and follow this treatment, seeking to find a light at the end of the tunnel, only for that light at the end of the tunnel to be a train that derailed me. I said, you're in the wrong business. And her face panged with rage. And she then said, you're dismissed. Concurrently and unfortunately, Dr. Grindo took the APA job around that time as a teaching director, and I was passed off to a not a good fit psychiatrist within MGH, the sister hospital, who offered 20 minutes every 6 weeks. And, you know, I can recall in terms of partial biases and fits, there was an entire session where she spent the time talking about how my insisting to hold the door open for her was misogynistic, rather than discussing logistics of the benzodiazepines as she was shoveling my direction. I've been brought up to 6-7 milligrams of Ativan a day, and I was dependent on that and not in a good spot. They tried to say, all right, we're going to refer you to somebody who happened to be a friend of the young psychologist who was learning DBT. that person spent a lot of time, looking back on it, I see the notes were pretty critical of me, but spent a lot of time saying, well, you know, please don't sue my buddy, Dr. So-and-so, it'll look really bad on me. And as an impressionable 23-year-old, I didn't understand the power dynamics or ethics, or of course we should have sued. It was more like an honor code thing, and the mental health care system's hurting. And so how can I meet these people where they're at? The fall of 2015 went on, and instead of meeting with my teammates for the Notre Dame game that I dreamt about since I was a young boy, I was in the fetal position in my parents' basement, sweating out benzodiazepines, watching the game on ESPN. Excuse me, it might have been ABC, but on national television. And I struggled mightily with the shame. Again, that article had been out. The social circle was like, where the heck is Matt? Instead of what we promote now for bridging the gap in sports and mental health, which is transparency and accountability. There was just a lot of questions and uncertainties. And the provider that I was seeing at the time, who again was asking me not to sue his friend, I was expressing frustration, saying, well, you know, he should be held accountable for this. And, you know, really trying to stick to that, but in no way, shape, or form was I ever a threat. I'd never hit anybody off the football field, nor did I ever make any direct threats. He thought the frustration was so much that that fall, I think around October, a tear-off warning was issued to the psychologist. And, you know, there's obviously no context of the other dynamics with the don't sue us stuff going on. In struggling mightily with the shame and in trying to ensure that this wouldn't happen to somebody else, I tried to approach my MGH psychiatrist about an internal review of the treatment and, you know, the damages that it cost me. They said, you know, no, because it's a sister hospital, we're not going to touch it. And so on the 8th of December, 2015, which is at root of what Matt's mission is, seeking to prevent for others, I made a less than optimally mature decision to try to treat the gripe I had with that young psychologist the same way I would a coach or a player who I had a real issue with, and have a closure conversation and speak to the fact that that's not okay in a direct way. But again, anyone who knows me knows that I was not a threat. I didn't make any direct threats. However, because of power dynamics and the way that mental health care system can all too often go, that's not how I was treated that day. So I began driving towards McLean's Hospital that day, seeking out to have a conversation with that psychologist. It had been sort of gray area because he'd been treating me outside of clinical parameters, just random calls during the, a couple calls during the week. Not being charged for it, thinking it was a cool case study that, the head coach was letting me wear a helmet, headphone under my helmet so I could listen to exposure ritual prevention tape during practice. And the type of relationship was sort of confusing in that way for me at that time as an impressionable 23-year-old. And my dad called the program director, still sort of in the dark, didn't know about the don't sue or the aggressive treatment. He was just a father looking to help out, and said, Matt's coming to try to talk to Dr. So-and-so. And the program director, the same one who had said, I think you're in the wrong business, to her face, said, no, absolutely not. If he comes by, he'll be detained by security until the police get here, and then he'll be arrested. So my dad relays that to me. I say, that's absolutely crazy, and pull over on my own accord, again, evidencing that I'm not a threat, go inside the Dunkin' Donuts on 95. And I'm just sort of thinking about, well, how am I going to handle this if they're telling me not to sue and I'm not getting any help from the internal resolve, and I know what happened was wrong, but I only have limited visibility from my vantage point as a 23-year-old consumer of mental health care services. I went back to my house, and my dad and I were talking about it at length a bit more, and the MGH psychiatrist had been speaking to my dad on the phone, and she said, bring him into the ER, be psychiatrically evaluated, or we'll section 12 him, send the police into your home and take him. And we were terrified. We had no idea what our rights were. And my dad said to me, Matt, this is the same hospital that like just over a year ago, Dr. Grindo, a great psychiatrist you had a great working relationship with, asked you to be the speaker at their 2014 Massachusetts General Hospital Adolescent Psychiatry Conference, given your stature, well, not directly implied, likely given your stature as an athlete that was open about mental illness. He said, let's go in, let's let them know the benzos are not working and that we need a new provider, and convinced me to go in with him that day. So we drove in, and immediately there were some things that were reminding me of that first encounter with the mental health care system at Westwood Lodge when I was 15. They asked me to, ditch my regular clothes and have the hospital garments, and there's a APS, acute, like a psychiatry wing in the Mass General ER, and we went there, and me and my dad are just hanging there for a bit. Some time goes by. He's like, let's just, you know how to handle this. We're just quiet, nothing. In his words, I was calm and collected. And a young resident came in, and she just asked me to take some medication. And because of the issues with the benzos, I'd said, as an articulate young man who knows how to perform under pressure, I just said, no, absolutely not. I'm happy to comply with any testing to assure you I'm not a threat to myself or anybody else. But I'm not willing to take any of those medications. That's part of the reason I'm struggling right now in the first place. And she left. 30 minutes later, came back. Same question. We'd like you to take medications. No, not willing to take medications, but I'm happy to comply with any testing to assure you I'm not a threat to myself or anybody else. Left. 30 minutes later, came back, and what happened next was extremely damaging, traumatizing, derailed a career, and really set me in a hole that required majority of my life energy to be able to survive and overcome and get to where I am in front of you today. She asked my dad to step down the hall to fill out some paperwork, and my dad said, why would that help? Get some accurate details so that he could get seen by somebody who can really help Matt given the circumstances. She said yes. She led my dad down a corridor and to a front desk and gave him a clipboard. And then she looked at my dad and said, oh, I forgot one thing. And she popped through those doors. The doors latched behind her and locked my dad out. My dad's texting the psychiatrist, and the resident just said, gave me a clipboard and said she forgot one thing, like, what's going on? It seems like something kind of funny is going on. And that young resident came back to that room with 9 men who were trained in football to read body language. They were looking at me very much like a school shooter or a doctor killer, and they were clearly seeing red. Scared the crap out of me. I backed into the corner of the room and began trying to verbally de-escalate. Again, just several which ways. I'm not willing to take those medications. One of my phobias relating to OCD is an affect phobia, and that includes not being able to feel anything. Again, I'm happy to comply with any testing. If you'd like me to take Benadryl or something like that, I'll take that, but I'm not willing to take some of these heavy medications that they were suggesting, like antipsychotics and things that I knew would not bring me any calm or be beneficial, or were not something that I would choose with my autonomy and right to my own body. And she said, well, actually, you're going to take medication, and not only going to take it, you're going to take Haldol and lorazepam injected in your pelvis while you're cuffed by wrist and ankle to that gurney over there. And I said, whoa, you've got me really messed up. And I had backed into the corner of this psychiatric side wing, and some of these security guards were really, gnarling. I remember gnarling white knuckles and dilated pupils. 2 of them had open canisters of mace that they were wielding on their hip, and in their hand. And in the standoff, which was a militaristic style standoff where I'm trying to advocate for my human rights, one of the security guards began openly weeping. So he stands, he goes, guys, can't you see he's a good kid? Don't assist him one. And then he stands between me, I'm in the corner of the room, and the resident and the other 8 security guards at the entrance of the room, and with arms extended, he looks at me with a tear rolling down his cheek, and he said, "Don't let the system win." I blessed myself, started saying the Our Father. The last thing they said was, before rushing me, was, "If you try to strike any of us, you'll be held legally accountable," which I think is a cowardly thing to do. Somebody you're about to unlawfully claim authority over their bodily autonomy. They kept saying, "Get on the bed, get on the bed." I said, "I will not let you put that into my body." And they took a step, especially 2 security guards who were supercharged up with mace. They maced the security guard that was crying in the way, and mace started coming towards me, and I made an attempt to use my skill set and run out of there like an NFL running back, not to strike anyone, but to flee for safety. And my attempt was unsuccessful. They maced me on my eyes, my chest, my genitalia, and those 9 men, they beat the shit out of me and stomped on me such that I couldn't feel sensation down the IT band of my right leg for 18 months. A trigger in trauma therapy that I did last year was the point at which I went with it. I was not using force to defend myself in ways that perhaps I should have. And when they start saying, "Are you going to be a good boy? You're going to be a good boy," I remember seeing a camera in the corner prior to and shouting, "I want the tape, I want the tape, I want the tape," as my shoulder was about to pop out. I shouted those things. When they succeeded in cuffing me down by wrist and ankle and pulling my pants down, a professional with a large needle came in and stabbed it in my pelvis 3 times before successfully hitting the vein. When they injected against my will, the haldol or azepam into me, I began phobically convulsing. And if you haven't seen a panic attack, it was something effective. "Oh." At which point their security staff began laughing and clapping. The security guard that was crying said, "I'm going to tell them to stop laughing. They shouldn't be laughing." I was pushed into a dark room where I had eyes. I had mace searing on my eyes, my chest, and my genitalia. I was crying out for pain and crying out for help. And a nurse came in prior to giving me another injection of Thorazine or something, and said, "Now you're going to quit crying like a big baby. You've brought this upon yourself," which I believe to be a microcosm of Satanism in America. After about 2.5 hours, that nurse came back in, tried to say, "Oh, well, I think we got off on the wrong foot. Looks like you've been here before. I'm going to let you up. Don't do anything stupid." At which point I saw my father for the first time, and they let me out to go shower to wipe the mace off my eyes, chest, and genitals. I saw my father cry for the 3rd time in my life. He said, "My boy, what'd you do, my boy?" I then went to shower and wiped the mace off, and they didn't have any beds in Mass General, so I went to Pembroke Hospital, where I was there for less than 72 hours, and they said, "We're so sorry that happened to you. Clearly, Matt's not a threat to himself or anybody else. The hospital where he was restrained has built up a reputation for expediting the physical and chemical restraint of patients in question for the logistical convenience of their emergency room." And the aftermath continued to be traumatizing. I'm going to talk to you about that. Some of these slides are, a trigger warning to illustrate the gravity of it. May be difficult for some of you, so I'll try to keep it brief. But that was some of the bruising from the 9 men that beat me up. The inside of my right leg is on the right. The outside of my right leg is on the left. And again, my right IT band and hip flexor, I couldn't feel sensation for 18 months. In the aftermath, like clockwork, driven by the program director, when I got back from Pembroke Hospital, we got a piece of of mail that said you're persona non grata, which in Latin translates to you're unpopular and unaccepted, and unable to get healthcare at the institution with majority of the competent providers in the area as it relates to trauma and OCD. So to be clear, I had an illness, had an opportunity, tried to deal with the illness the right way, got an inappropriate form of treatment that was over aggressive, got told not to sue, passed off to a colleague, again, being told not to sue. When I tried to solve the issue by means of not suing, I was coerced, isolated, assaulted, ruthlessly beaten, physically and chemically restrained, and dealt more psychophysiological damage and trauma than I ever could have accounted for. And in the aftermath of that, I was served a piece of paper saying I was unpopular and unaccepted and unable to get health care without any seemingly checks and balances or any voice of justice or reason. Months after the abuse, when we were still trying to salvage my bill of mental health and life, my dad wrote a letter to the vice president of McLean's, which is on the right, and they responded with no, we're still responding as if in an email, as if it was a veiled threat or a covered threat, and as such, we're going to hold the persona non grata. The social scene was sort of like, what the heck happened to Matt? He hasn't been around for a while. This is very unlike him. There was rumors in social circles, had I gone crazy? What's the deal? And we were shouldering that in real time. It seemed like in the immediate aftermath from a human experience that my initial paths were either to move from a place of hopelessness and take the easy way out, or take my own life, or to seek to do to my abusers as they had done to me. But my mixture of faith and family is what saved me. I continued to interview a dozen psychiatrists in the Boston area outside of the Partners umbrella to see who could help me titrate up the benzodiazepines. Coach Whipple stayed in touch every month, said, hey, you can still play in the league if you're healthy. And we weren't talking about a knee or a shoulder. And on 2.5 years later, after really white knuckling and using suboptimally effective treatment to try to survive, I came back on medical hardship waiver in October of 2017 as a graduate student at the University of Massachusetts. I lost my scholarship and had to go back as a walk-on in an attempt to finish my playing career on my terms. I was 25 years old. I still didn't realize really how traumatized I was. Like, I still had some glimpses of myself as a player. But, I recall against Brigham Young University in November of 2017, I got an uncharacteristic 15-yard flag, a personal foul, and it was a defensive back was just, talking crap per usual. And instead of me being like, yeah, okay, buddy, I sort of lashed out and met him with the trash talk, and our face masks touched. And then I, got a flag, and Coach Whips is red as a lobster yelling at me, I stick my neck out for you, and you want to be a nice guy and all that. And, didn't make sense in real time. But then in 2021, when I finally got in with a good trauma-informed psychologist, he's like, well, Coach screamed at you because he thought you overreacted to some, defensive player talking crap, because that's how they get by, when in reality you underreacted because your brain wasn't just responding to that defensive back, it was responding to that defensive back and the 9 security guards that your brain's still holding on to. And that seemed to really make a lot of sense in terms of what I was experiencing. At the end of the season, coach had said you can still play in the league if you're healthy. So I took the path less traveled with developmental leagues and workouts and camps and tryouts like the Alliance of American Football, the XFL, Arena Football League. And that led me on a journey of getting some really honest support from people in the football world, and learning how to long snap, and signing 3 contracts. And, as far as finishing on my terms, I didn't realize the lucrative benefits that were originally projected, but I was able to snap in front of the NFL guys when it's hot in the kitchen, so to speak, meaning they have their clipboards, they're timing your snaps and really critically evaluating you without my mind going back to that emergency room. And at that point, I looked at it, do I want to be a guy that's playing into his 30s, trying to salvage something that trauma took away from me, or do I want to be proud about this? And, with my goals of being a future father and husband and provider, do I want to really take care of the baggage that this trauma has caused? So two things happened. One was I went to a really good, and I would recommend them to anyone, a trauma treatment program in West Dallas, Wisconsin, run by Rand Ho-Fung and a therapist, Emily Golding, who was really the Jesus to my Mary Magdalene. And she helped bring down some walls about, mental health care and really took a stand on how disgusting what happened to me in healthcare was, and encouraged me to sue. And, we made a lot of progress on reducing symptoms of PTSD. And was part of what allowed me to be open and talk about these things to audiences like this or at the APA. And the other thing that happened was a lot of my friends that were proximal to it, who it was no secret, like, where the heck did Matt go? Where was he at? When I finally was able to speak to them about it, they were all like, what the heck? Like, this is a society we live in? And they corralled crowd the troops, so to speak, which speaks to my privilege and, where I'm at, to create a vehicle and a nonprofit, Matt's Mission Inc., to ensure that experiences, or work towards ensuring that experiences like I had can never happen to another patient again. So this here is, 2017 senior day, the first game back, my family and Coach Whip, the people that knew meant a lot. And then, my pro day, where I didn't realize how much I was being criticized for some of the mental health stuff as opposed to the performance stuff. But I was not in control of the narrative and still didn't really understand what happened to me in 2017. So the organization and the friends that came together has been a tremendous blessing. First off, I would like to speak about this lady, Ellen Sachs. Me even having the wherewithal or courage to be transparent about what I went through and try to reshape the way professionals think when they're approaching crisis intervention is because I'm able to stand on her shoulders. When I read her memoir, The Center Cannot Hold, which, if you haven't read it, I think it's a must read for anybody in the field. I was deeply touched, started crying, shot her an email. I gave her a call. She invited me into her office, and we really hit it off in terms of collaboration. Dr. Jackson was somebody we got connected with through the APA. When Dr. Gorindo had heard about what happened to me, he was all hands on deck to try to help with the advocacy. And he was Dr. Jackson was a like-minded fellow at the time who went through the Columbia Psychiatry program. And really got to helping synergize to come up with some intersectional and collaborative solutions. Some of my friends in the NFL leveraged some of those backgrounds in, raffling off jerseys and such to raise capital. And at the APA conference, as far as presenting, it was me, Dr. Sachs, Dr. Jackson, Dewey, and then we also gave a teammates and coaches perspective on what I went through, and the absences and the questions, and just how much it affected them, what I went through from a teammate who was Andy Isabella at UMass, and a coach who, saw how hard I was working with the exposure scripts in real time, but didn't understand what happened after I left until years later. With Matt's Mission, we leaned into the adage that God says, ops, not oops, kind of a football adage that may seem like a cheap platitude, but the idea there is that, when things are messy or when things are not up to, they're palpably wrong. It's not a oops, woe is me moment, but it's an opportunity to be a leader and to try to help create value and help solve some problems. So we pretty immediately raised over $10,000 at our initial fundraiser. And I would say, from a therapeutic standpoint, having the community respond in that way was deeply meaningful to me. We came up with some intersectional research with the Sax Institute of Mental Health Law and SUNY Downstate and Emory Medical, including, and part of what I'm going to talk to you today is the facilities that I respect the most in terms of reducing or eliminating seclusion or restraint practices use, which is they film everything. It goes back to the Hawthorne effect of people behave better when they're being filmed, and it really cuts out the middleman, right? When MGH tried to defend their use of pepper spray after the article came out this May, their spokesperson said they only do it when they're afraid for their staff is afraid for their lives or others. Well, what I told you today is that one of the security guards was crying and saying, guys, can't you see he's a good kid with the tear rolling down his cheek? Don't let the system win. So if that was filmed and captured, it cuts out the he said, she said, and I think could be a uncomfortable but direct route to remedying some of these situations. And in theory, it would protect the hospital as well, because if you're not doing anything wrong, litigation comes around, that's your evidence. So this was the APA conference. It was the first time that I publicly told my story and made that calculated sacrifice. I think if you look hard enough, you can find Kaylee somewhere in that audience. But I couldn't have anticipated for the life of me the response. I remember there was a Harvard medical resident who came up and said, hey, me too. And he said that's why he got into psychiatry, to help solve that problem, right? Like, we treat people less than human when they're trying to go about an illness. And, the emails were pretty profound. I don't have enough time and I don't have the permission to share them with you today, but it very much validated from peers that it was a worthwhile endeavor. The Ellen Berry of the New York Times ran the article, especially after talking to psychiatrists in the crowd and some of the powerful and emotional response that said, like, hey, we don't have to do things the way we've always done it. And that's what, for one or two of you, I think coming here today, I hope to inspire that conviction that you have an opportunity to be a leader in a sector of healthcare that really needs good leadership. And you have an opportunity to set up practices and culture, really, that avoids circumstances like what I went through. One of the things in our research that we came across that I wanted to talk to you today was what Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta, led by Dr. Rob Cotes, who's a friend of Dr. Jackson's, do. And it's not rocket science as it relates to reducing or eliminating seclusion or restraint. It was a 6-pronged strategy. Their first piece was a top-down approach where they had conversations being very clear that seclusion or restraint is not a treatment modality, it's a failure of treatment. They used data to inform practice, and that included filming everything. So whenever there's an issue in question, they review it on a high level with their team and learn from it or get better. And then they preach some of those values to their workforce. They use de-escalation and understanding patients' tendencies to talk to them and cut that down. They look to empower those with lived experience in part of solving the issue. And I think debriefing techniques is speaking to being more in depth. I know Mass General has a drop-down menu after seclusion and restraint, so they don't even really need to put their own words to justify why they did what they did. But what they did with this is they took it from, and please listen to this, an average of 28 seclusion and restraint incidents per month on a unit to not a single seclusion or restraint for 19 months. Which begs the question, if there are data-driven solutions to solve these problems, why isn't it standardized across the country? And what opportunity do you guys have here at Berkshire Medical Center to implement some of these protocols that are proven to be effective? From there, I would like to say that what I've found on a personal level, as you consider or digest the story I shared with you today, my providers got it really wrong, right? I lost a lot. My community lost a lot. The mental health community, arguably at large, based on what I wanted to do with my time and influence in the NFL, lost a lot. At its core, beyond the don't sue and the practice that was not good on the therapy side, the brutality and the seclusion and restraint was the most damaging piece to my life. Seclusion and restraint is not a trauma-informed practice. Trauma-informed, as I understand it, is understanding that when a person presents as potentially intimidating or voices being upset from one way or another, that comes from a profound place of fear, hurt, and mistrust, and does not necessarily mean that they're a threat. That knowledge, coupled with personal testimony like what I shared with you today, I hope that makes to grant you the emotional wherewithal and strength that when you as leaders and professionals in psychiatry are stepping into some of these spaces, you hold that in the forefront of your minds to find the strength to get it right for others, to de-escalate. There's a lot of untapped potential in society if we can get this whole mental health care system thing right. I don't think any of you would be in here if you didn't understand that. And I think a potent opportunity to make a step and advance how we practice as a field, just to get crisis intervention right and to de-escalate when you can. So there's the trauma-informed approach, there's the data-driven side, and then there's some other higher level legislative initiatives the Kennedy Forum are getting involved in, and Matt's mission is beginning to get involved in. My pet project as I head to law school next year is hopefully going to be able to start a crisis intervention company that helps train psychiatry staffs in emergency rooms to de-escalate, and also is able to implement mobile crisis teams to have appropriate resources to meet people where they're at when they're in their most need. Lastly, I'd like to say that what my group and some of the people that I've been fortunate enough to leverage relationships with as a token of privilege, right? I'm from a two-parent middle-class family home at the top of the privilege pyramid, and this practice is even uglier to other people who are more intersectionally marginalized. Of 4,393 patients between 2012 and 2018 that were involuntarily committed at Mass General Hospital in the state of Massachusetts, which is roughly 76% white, 58% of those patients were Black and 25% were white, which you can irrefutably infer means that these practices are happening based off partial biases and power imbalance as opposed to chemical imbalance or medicine. What you do with that data and with stories like this is entirely up to you. But I hope you choose to see it how we see it, which is that there's an opportunity that elevate the standard to be better practitioners and to help get the most out of the most marginalized of the patient population. Thank you.